From Deer Park Monastery, it's Meet the Monastics. I'm Brother Min An.
Get rid of all of your ideas of what monastic path is. You come here. I mean, the practice is wonderful, and it's for you to come and see for yourself. But if you start getting ideas of what you expect monastic life to be like, you have a hard time. Because then there's two sides to the coin, if you want to say it, Sometimes the sisters have some expectation, and then you yourself have some expectations. Oh, I thought this was a Buddhist community. We're supposed to practice loving kindness and compassion and help. Everybody's so mean and honestly, if you let go of their ideas and just focus on your bodhichitta, focus on what you want, and those are the things of how people say things to you, and how will just sort of be minor. It's not important.
Each week I talk to a different monk or nun about their journey to monastic life and what inspires them now. Today, my conversation with Sister Kinh Nghiem, one of our eldest sisters at Deer Park, who ordained at Plum Village, France in 1997 at the age of, wait for it, 14 years old. Now, today we don't generally consider training monastics under the age of 18, but in Asian countries it's far more common to receive novice ordination as a teenager, and Plum Village was a different place in 1997. Also known as Sister Chicken to the kids, she's known for her unique style and her sense of humor. If you've ever been to the monastery and wondered about the nun carrying a woven basket, wearing mirrored sunglasses and a big floppy hat, that's Sister Kinh Nghiem. I have to say, I had so much fun with this interview. Sister Kinh Nghiem is a straight shooter and a fast talker, okay? So buckle your seatbelt. Sister Kinh Nghiem is the daughter of Vietnamese immigrants. She was born and raised in San Diego, not far from Deer Park. Her father was raised Catholic, but was no longer practicing by the time Sister Kinh Nghiem was born.
My mom, on the other hand, is very, very Buddhist. and she would do chanting every morning before she goes to work. So she would do, chanting like they do at the monasteries. And that was our wake-up call in the morning when we get to school. And then, she's at home. She leaves after we leave for school, but she's already chanting at 5 o'clock in the morning. And then we would hear it, because living in an apartment, 3-bedroom apartment, we would hear it. And so every morning she would chant the sutras, daily practice. And then that would be our wake up, if you want to wake up bell, our alarm clock, with her on the fish drum, chanting away. And if by a certain hour, there's the clock just hanging, she has it clocked. But if by I think it's 5:45, if she doesn't hear any rustling sounds or bathroom doors closing or brushing her teeth or hair, whatever it is, she would take the mallet of the fish drum and start knocking on the wall in the rhythm and still chant and just invite the drum instead of inviting the wall, to wake up and go to school. And then that would be, and she wouldn't get off and she would still chant, but then her hands would be on the wall, knocking on the wall. So she's a devout practitioner. And this stems all the way back to in Vietnam. She said she knew Thay when she was in Vietnam, when she was a teenager. And it was my grandmother, her mom, would sell Thay's magazines when they were published. And there was a period of time in Vietnam where those magazines were illegal, were banned. And she used to be a vendor. My grandmother was a vendor, so she would sell vegetables and things like that. And so she would hide the magazines in her basket. And then she would, discreetly distribute them. Mm-hmm. And so my mom would be following my grandmother to those events, because as a little child. So then she read a lot of Thay's writing. She knew of Thay. And every single time when she migrated to the United States, every single time Thay had a retreat, a Vietnamese retreat, she would attend. And my mom made so many attempts for us to go to a retreat. But I was like, who's that old man? Like, this is boring. What is like any child, like your parents make you go and then you go and then they make you wear the robe, the short robes, and you wear it. And then I remember one time it was at Camp Sealy, she said, go up there, go up. Then she would push me to the front during walking meditation. I mean, I didn't know that there was a walking meditation, but she would push me to the front and she said, hold his hand, hold his hand. I was like, who is this guy? Like, I didn't know whose hand I was holding and why are we walking so slow. And
How old are you?
I was like 6, 7. Like every single year, we wouldn't attend the whole retreat because it would land on like the beginning of school, but we would come up for the weekend. And we would do walking meditation. And I remember having to hold this guy's hand. It was like stiff and not knowing, I was just looking forward. And just walking and just thinking, like, why are we walking so slow? This is so boring. And then when he let go of my hand, I would run off. I had no concept of meditation, regardless of how serious and how sincere my mother's practice was. And then she knew we didn't speak Vietnamese, so we couldn't read it. And so she would buy books, Thay's books in English. And in the summer, if we didn't have summer school, we would have to read Thay's books. And she made it like, oh, I don't understand English, so you have to read this and give me a book report every day in Vietnamese. Like, I didn't know it. Now, just I think about it, I've been translating Thay's books, translating Thay's teachings from English into Vietnamese for a long time, since I was a child. But it was, of course, very broken then. And so what I would do, because she said, she would go to work and she would leave us at home with my sisters, yeah? And she said, you would read one chapter every day, one chapter. And then by the time I get home, because she 9 hours work, by the time I get home, you have to give me a report of what you read that day and what you thought about it, And I would cheat. I would totally cheat. I would read like 3 pages in the beginning of the chapter and then like the last 2 pages at the end of the chapter. And then just report on those those things, And then because my Vietnamese was so broken, I couldn't, speak. So then I just said, oh, this is what he said. This is what he said. My younger sister, though, she read the whole chapter, right? She did her homework. And I was like, I cheat. I didn't want to, because I was like, I don't need this kind of stuff. I was anything but religious. I did go to a Buddhist youth every Sunday. But that's almost considered like a cultural thing, also a Buddhist youth thing. You learn very basic Buddhism. There's the chanting, there's the history, and then there's sutras. But, that's about it. But I was still too young. I was in the very preschool or elementary level of that Buddhist youth. So I didn't go very far. But I was anything but religious that time, but my mom was. And I think the last retreat that I went to was when I was 14, and it was a retreat specifically for the Buddhist youth and was organized in San Diego. And my mom forced me to go for the whole retreat. I was like, oh, this is going to be so boring. And but I decided to go because she said you can take a week off of school. So I took a week off of school to take my homework and do my homework whenever I could during the retreat. And then it just took off from there. Like because I kept on thinking, like, well, I'm not going to understand this guy, which was Thay. Yeah, I'm not going to understand this guy. And so I just sat there. She made me go to the retreat. I thought, I'm here at the retreat, okay, And then she's like, going to sit in the Dharma talk, sit in the front. I was like, what? I'm going to be so embarrassed listening to this guy or half listening and falling asleep. I'm going to make a fool of myself. And she's like, just sit in the front. She pushed me up to the front. And I just sat there. I just remember just sulking, sitting there. I'm like, okay, whatever. And somehow, like, it just clicked at me at one point that I was like, oh, this guy makes sense. He makes perfect sense. Whatever he's saying, it just makes sense. And I was 14 at that time. And not a practitioner. Like, I don't consider myself a practitioner. I knew nothing about meditation prior to that, regardless of how many books I was forced to read. It was like what they call in Vietnamese, like pouring water on a duck's head. You know, like it doesn't get wet. And and so that's what it felt like for me. But when I sat there at that retreat, like nothing else really stood out to me, but it was just like this whole processing, because during the whole Dharma talk, somehow I was listening. It was in Vietnamese, and I just took in what I could, and I just sort of put things together, how I'm supposed to understand it. And then I had this whole like conversation and argument with Thay in my head. You know, like, no, but you said this. Like with my broken Vietnamese and my shallow understanding of what he's really trying to say, I'm having this argument with him, like this debate with him in my own head. And then but every single time I think I have an argument and he can't top it, he comes around and he says another thing. I was like, oh, he got me. Now I have to figure something out. Just to counter his whatever he said. And at the end of that retreat, that's when I decided, okay, I'm going to be a nun. Well, not I'm going to be a nun. How it was like, how come I'm the only one who, from my school, of 500, 600, 1,000 students, how come I'm the only one who hears this? Because it makes so much sense, what he was saying, the message. And why is it I'm the only one here? My friends need to see that there's a different way of how to respond to certain things in society. And I mean, it's a progress of 4 or 5 days, you know, like the series of the Dharma talk, and it kept watering that seed. And by the end, like before the end of the Dharma talk, 2 days before the end of the Dharma talk, I said, okay, if I want to help my friends, like the very basic, it wasn't about finding peace for myself. I had no idea what peace was, even at that time. But it was like, if I wanted to help my friends see that there's a different way of how to handle life situations, then this is the way to do it. I got to learn all of this stuff. Like to tell them, hey, you guys, we don't have to do drugs. We don't have to do sex. We don't have to commit suicide. We don't have to do any of that. And there's a way that we can process this kind of suffering. But, you know, like I was 14 and didn't know anything else other than, oh, this makes sense. And it makes perfect sense. And there's so much logic behind it. And I guess you can say that I had like this contemplation or looking deeply or whatever it is. Like you use those meditative words. But it for me, it was just so simple. Like, yes, it makes sense and that's it. And there were no other what ifs or but ifs or should I or would I or could I. It was just like, yeah, it is what it is. And there's no argument around that. Very simple-minded. And regardless of how strong somebody's practice is, it won't get to you until you find it yourself. Yeah. And I know my uncles and aunts on my father's side of the family try to like water the seeds of Christianity, Catholicism. In me, I watched every single cartoon on the Bible because it was all they gave me for Christmas. And for me, it was just, oh, another cartoon. And I'm like, oh, okay. It didn't come to me like, oh, this is something holy or spiritual. It was just, oh, like I got nothing else to watch on TV, so I'm just gonna watch this cartoon. I remember it was called the Superbook. I was like, okay, this is a weird name for it, but it didn't occur to me. Like religion, even though I was surrounded by it, didn't affect the way that I lived my everyday life, because I still got to go to school. I have to do everything else. It's almost like I didn't have time for religion. You know, like I mean, I can word it now, but before it was just like, I'm going to go out and have fun with my friends. You know, why am I going to sit and read a sutra? You know, like, I don't think anybody grows up in that sense, in that manner.
So just hearing Thay at 14 at that camp, what I'm hearing is that it was just, you were kind of overwhelmed by the logic.
Yeah. It was, I guess it just made sense. So much sense. You can say scientifically or even in logic. Because at 14, you just don't know. You know, somebody asked me, how did you know you wanted to be a monastic at 14? It's like, I don't know. I didn't even know. Like I didn't even know that I had to take the 10 novice precepts. It's a career choice, if you want to say that. I didn't know what the qualifications are, what the demands are in being a monastic. We didn't have like this thorough monastic aspirant training at that time. And it was just like, oh, I want to become a monastic. But I had no idea that I couldn't get married. I had no idea that I couldn't get a job. I had no idea I couldn't get a house. Like, they were like secondhand things, you know, like on the back burner. Like, how is that important right now? It wasn't a matter of importance. You know, like some of my friends, like, you're going to miss prom. I was like, so what? like this idea that society has given you, like these are the steps in life that you need to take. You know, you go to school, you get a job, and you go to prom, and then you have your, you know, homecoming, whatever it is, and get crowned homecoming queen, whatever. And so then I had, like, for me, because I was so young, I guess at that time, no concept whatsoever of like, oh yeah, I need to do that before I become a monastic, or like a career choice. Actually, before, like, everybody wants to live the American dream, I guess, so-called dream. I've always wanted to be a lawyer. And so that's why I guess I was debating with Thay. I was like, no, and it just was that seed in me that I always wanted to be a lawyer. And when I was having this debate with her, okay, he just like put everything aside. I don't know why or how it came to me. Maybe it's because it's an Asian thing. Either you become a doctor, or you become a lawyer, or an engineer. This idea of most Asian families go through. But I've always wanted to be a lawyer. And so my focus was only that. To be successful in society. And I'll do whatever it takes to become success.
But you're saying that your friends at 14, some of them were saying, you know, what about prom and so on, expressing their doubts about that. Were there any adults who were expressing doubt about that?
Yeah, well, not particularly about prom or getting my license or anything like that. So a lot of people ask, you know, how could your mom let you go at 14 and your dad? You know, like when I asked my parents, and it happened really quick. After the retreat, I think it ended like mid-October. I was in Plum Village, France, on the 10th of November. Like, really quick. There was like, I had to go to school and say, hey, I'm dropping off out of school. And it just happened so quick from the end of the retreat, beginning of October, mid-October. And then I flew to Key West, Florida, to join the community there for their psychology retreat. And from there, I went with the monastics to France. Okay. Within, I would say, no more than 3 weeks' time. My dad, my dad was like, I don't want you to become a nun. I don't want you to become a nun. But go ask your mom. You know, like everybody says, go ask your mom. He didn't want to get in trouble saying yes or no. Mm-hmm. But my argument with my dad, he's like, wait until you finish high school. Mm-hmm. Because I was only 14 at that time. Wait until you finish. My sister said, wait until you finish high school. Like, at least get a high school degree. And then I was like, I'm not going to argue with my sister. You're like, what do you know? I'm acting like, what do you know? But I told my dad, and he's like, he was their voice also, saying, finish high school or finish college. And I was like, what if Thay said, because during the series of the Dharma talks and during the retreat, Thay said life is impermanent. What if I die tomorrow and I would never get to do it and it's on you? And then he's like, go ask your mom. Like, go ask your mom. I don't want to deal with this. You go ask your mom. And my mom, on the other hand, I guess because she was a practitioner, she was probably secretly very happy that I wanted to become a nun, but she didn't want to express it. And she said, you do whatever you want to do. And because she all parents know their kids' personality. Because I was very independent when I was young. Like, regardless of whoever it was, I would talk back and I would argue, and I would not be submissive to whatever, like, however way it was. And she said, you do whatever you want. And then later on, like, I think 4 or 5 years down the line, my sister, she's also ordained, my younger sister also ordained, she asked, why did you allow Sister Kinh Nghiem to ordain at 14 and you did not allow me to ordain until I was 16? That's not fair. And my mom said, because Sister Kinh Nghiem could take care of herself. At that time, everybody knew how to cook. I did the laundry for the family. Like, I was very independent. I didn't need anyone to depend on to take care of myself. If anything, I could take care of myself. Like, I know how to cook. If there was no food and no one's going to cook for me, I'm just going to go do it for myself. Not to say that my sister wasn't. My younger sister wasn't, She was, yeah. But and mom also had, the baby of the family, wanted to hold on to the baby a little longer. And so, and then she said, and I only learned this 5 years after I ordained. She said, the reason why I didn't say yes or no to your request and I wanted you to make the call was because I did not want to say no. And then along the line, somewhere down the line, you don't become a monastic and you blame me for it. Or I didn't want to say yes, I support. And then you become a monastic. And then down the line somewhere, you decide not to and you blame me for pushing you into the monastery. And so I wanted you to be responsible for your own choices. And that's how it came. Mm-hmm.
So then you went to France and you ordained pretty quick after arriving in France.
Yes. I ordained, I would say almost 2.5 months right after I arrived.
So what was the relationship with Thay at that time, like, and him deciding that you were ready?
Well, I don't know. I mean, like, I had I didn't think that I was close to Thay, or I still did not understand who he was. Couldn't grasp the weight of being Thay's student, like we didn't have internet. Oh, we did have internet at that time, but it's still very new, but it was like, I had no idea who he was. I didn't know he was famous, I had no concept whatsoever, but I was like, this guy makes sense. And that was it. And so then, I have to say, a rumor was spread during that retreat that I attended to for the Buddhist youth, that there were 2 young people who wanted to become monastics, and that was myself and Brother Wayne. And we were friends. We were friends since we were 5 years old, And so the rumor had already spread, I think, second to the last day of the retreat, that we had wanted to ordain. And then Wayne comes up to me at that time and he's like, hey, Shikochen Kong, I'm like, who's that? Shikochen Kong wants to meet us at the stairs here after Dharma discussion. Like, I didn't know what Dharma discussion was. I just knew it was the time on the schedule, and I just sat there quietly. And so then he said, okay, well, I'll meet you at the steps, at the bottom of the steps here. And then she said that Thay wants to meet us. And that was like my first conscious encounter with Thay. You know, like before, my mom would force me to do walking meditation with him, hold his hand, but it was like not my choice. So then it was my first conscious meeting. Yeah. Like official meeting with Thay. And I remember going up the stairs. Sister Zheng brought us in, and she knocked on the door. I'm like, okay. And then Thay said, come in. And he was receiving a massage by one of his attendants. And then we closed the door, and Sister Zheng goes, you know, we have these two kids, they want to become monastic. And Thay was in the middle of receiving his massage. And so what happened was, we just sat there. He was in his part of the room, you know, and there was a curtain, I think, just to section off his room and the living room. But then the attendant was boiling water at that time, and it had just finished boiling to make tea for Thay. And I don't know what an attendant was, but then the attendant signaled to me, and he was like, sort of like nodded over at the water boiler and the thermos. And said, like, the communication was, can you fill up the thermos with water? Can you do that? And I remember going there just at the corner of the room, just filling the thermos in. And I was like, why does this feel so familiar? It's like, I've done this before. You know, like, I've done this before somewhere. Like, filling the thermos. I've never made tea before in my entire life. I don't even know how to drink tea at 14. You know, like, but it just felt so familiar. Pouring water into that thermos and just sort of setting it on that tray. It was like almost by natural response to the work. And then when Thay finished his massage, he came over, and then the attendant offered tea to Thay, and he gave us tea, and it was, of course, too hot. I didn't drink hot water at that time. I don't think any teenager would. And I wasn't nervous because I had no idea who he was, but Wayne was nervous. He was shaking. And I was like, what is wrong with you? Anyways, so then at that time, Thay had an article about him come out on the Time magazine. And it was an interview that he did at Spirit Rock, when he had the retreat at Spirit Rock. And he took out the magazine and he showed it to us. 1997 was it? And he showed us, and he said, "Oh, this is the picture," da da da, and he told us to read it. So then he was watching us, and the both of us were reading it, and I'm like, okay, so what is about? Like, I still at that time did not have an idea of what meditation is and how it's supposed to make you feel better and healing or transforming. Like, it wasn't about that. And then there was a picture of him. I remember there was a picture of him doing walking meditation with his attendant, Brother Fap Zhou, at that time. And he was I would say the second young monk or the first young monk, however way you see it. But he was 17 at that time. He's South African, European South African. So, and he was the baby monk at that time. And it was a picture of him attending Thay at Spirit Rock. And I was just like, oh, okay. You know, because I knew him. He was at the retreat anyway. So then we hung out, all the young monastics hung out with them, and all the kids hung out with him. So I knew him. So he was in this article with Thay. And then we returned the newspaper to Thay, and he was like, you know, being a monastic is not easy. And, you know, like, I don't know what to say to that, because I don't know what being a monastic is. And Wayne and I just sat there, and he was just telling us, being a monastic is not easy. It's not like driving in a Mercedes on the freeway. It's driving in an old car, going up the mountain on a dirt road with lots of potholes. Do you think you can do it? And I was like, duh. In my head, I was like, of course. I've never driven in a Mercedes before, so I don't know what it's like. So I didn't know at that time. It was like a metaphor that he was using, like, for me, it was like, oh, I've been camping before. I've driven up the mountain roads before. And of course, I've met potholes on the roads, and I've never driven in a Mercedes. So I don't know what that feels like. So of course I can do this. And then he asked us, do you think you can ordain? And I just drew my palm, and the only Vietnamese word that I knew fluently was yeah, yes. Didn't understand the depth of his metaphor at that time. And then, and then we had one cup of tea, and then he just said, oh, you're going to do this. You can arrange, talk to Sister Chen Kong to go to Plum Village. Da, 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 da. And then it just took off from there. Like, I had no other concept of anything else at that time. None. And then we left the room. And then I remember telling Wayne, going down the stairs, okay, what was that? Okay, so that's it? That's all we have to do to ordain as a monastic? Like, I didn't know we had training. I didn't know there was fine manners. I was like, all we have to do is go to France? Okay. And the temple is there, and there's so many other temples in San Diego. There's so many other places, but I didn't think, why do I have to go to France for it? I just thought, okay, so we're just told to go, and this is what we're supposed to do. Yeah, and it took off from there.
So, as you started to learn more about what it entailed, was there any doubt that came up?
No. No. I mean, how do you know, at what point do you know that what career choice or what life choice entails? There's no end point to it, right? So then even if you become a doctor, you still have to do some more. And there's more of this. This is involved and all that kind of stuff. So then for me, I never had any problems learning, what I had to learn. It didn't occur to me that it's going to be an obstacle or it's something that I should go against. Sort of like if you want to become a lawyer, you have to learn history, you have to learn law, you have to learn all the politics, whatever it is, in order to graduate. And then you have to do, like your bar exam, whatever, in order to become a lawyer. And the same thing with the doctor. You have to know science, you have biochemistry, whatever it is. All of that sort. So when I said I wanted to become monastic, I just took these courses, if you want to call it, as fine manners. Okay, if I need to do that, then I will do that. If I need to shave my head, then it's required for me to complete this course, then I will shave my head. I will put on. And so then for me, it's almost like, because I was just like in high school, only 9th grade. I didn't even finish 9th grade of high school. A couple months of high school. And it just came to me like, these are study courses that I have to do. So then I didn't have any doubt, because if I wanted to be successful, then these are the things that would lead me to that success, meeting that kind of success. So I didn't have a problem practicing, though I may not understand the approach of other individuals and how they approached it, and I objected to their approach, but doesn't necessarily mean that I objected the whole course in itself, like the whole lecture or the whole teaching behind it. Yeah.
Do you remember what it was in that talk that started to sway you? Like what kind of Dharma door you entered?
I don't want to officially say it's a Dharma door, because I had no concept of it. But I do remember it's sort of like the eye-opening. Like I had moments, lots of moments were eye-opening moments. I think how he used to give Dharma talks was like, you start off with the Dharma talks of watering the seeds of happiness, recognizing conditions of happiness that you have, like your mother and your father and your family is still there, and you have your eyes, your good health and things like that, and watering those positive seeds. And then he pointed out, like sometimes we chase after happiness in the future. And then, he says, we're all working and we get money in order to buy a house, but then you can't enjoy the house because you have to have money to pay off the house, and you continue to work harder, and then you buy a new car and you can't enjoy that car because you see your neighbors have a better car and you want to, and so then he's like, yeah, you have these ideas of happiness in the future when you have this and when you have this, and for me it's like, oh yeah, okay, well, so that means I don't really need to have a lot of things, like that chase. Because even for me at that time, I wanted to be a lawyer because it's a good paying job. And that's, I don't know if anybody has enough passion for law, like a passion for it, for law itself. I think it's because they have a passion for it because it makes money and it pays the bills, and then it pays off your student debt. But it was that, like, I, at that time, had already, thinking far ahead. This is what I want to do because I get a lot of money from it. I get to do, argue with people, and I can live in a house, and I can have my own car, and can be very independent. This idea that we have of it. And so when he said that, we're always working for something in the future, and we lose our happiness, the happiness that we have in this moment. At that time, he said, yeah, your mom and dad are still here and in good condition, but you don't have time for them. That you are worrying about school and getting money. And again, coming back to when I have money, then I'll take care of them. But then who knows if they'll be around. Mm-hmm. And then for me at that time, my mom, she was doing well. She had to go through surgery. And it didn't occur to me that my mother, I think for a lot of young kids, it never occurs to them that their parents will no longer be there. Because we live in this idea that they're a permanent world. Yeah, they'll always be there. They'll always love us. And so then for me, I was also one of those kids. I think all kids are the same. And so when Thay said that, we miss out on the happiness that we have now because we hope that we will have it in the future if we work hard now. And that just sort of opened my eyes. I was like, oh yeah, mom is sick, she's about to get surgery. I don't know what it was because I was too young to know what kind of surgery it was, but I know she had to go to surgery. And so, oh, so that's me. He called me out. He called me out that I didn't really care for my mom. I can openly say that, oh, I love my mom, and I do anything for her, but not now. I was one of those kids. And then when Thay gave that Dharma talk, it just made me stop, though I did not have that proper terminology when I was younger. It just sort of made me look back and stop at that. But at that time, I was oh, I identified myself as that, and I wanted to change it. The next Dharma talk that he gave, he spoke about suffering. You water the seeds of happiness, and then you become aware of suffering. And I didn't think that I had suffered. Who suffers at 14? When you have everything, or I lived in my own world. As a teenager, I had friends, lots of friends doing drugs. In gangs and all this kind of stuff. So it was not not known. It was just it was the society norm. It was made into a society norm. And so teenagers growing up, they would think that, okay, that's what I could do. That's an option. And we have not made it, even into this day, I think, we have not made it a norm, a society norm where we can sit and talk about it. We can speak about mental health issues. We can't speak about our feelings. It's not yet a norm. And so but we're always being bought or being sold into, oh, this is what it is. This is what you need to have. This is what you need to do. And so going back to that Dharma talk that when Thay spoke about suffering, at that time I labeled, I don't have any problems. This is not for me. But reflecting on my friend who committed suicide because he felt so much anger at his girlfriend. We were 14. Mind you, we're 14. And he was so angry at his parents because they had so much expectations on him. They wanted him to be a certain way. He's Vietnamese American also. And he couldn't handle it. He had so much anger bottled up in him that he wanted to express his anger. And he wanted to hurt his parents and his friends the way that they had hurt him. Make us feel that same kind of pain. And that was the Dharma talk that sort of made me stop or look back on, wow, okay, so there's a lot of things that I don't know, that I haven't really, like being a teenager, we're so busy, that didn't give us a chance to look at. And then Thay gave a Dharma talk on impermanence. If you want to do something, you should do it now. You should express your love now. You should do things now and not wait until tomorrow, because who knows what tomorrow will bring. And that was my argument to win over my dad. If I don't do this now, you're going to regret. And so then that just made me, woke me up one after another, even though I wouldn't want to say that I was woke. But it gave me little moments of reflection, informal reflection. Yeah. And up until, just recently, in 2001, I met up with one of my middle school friends. We're still friends. I think you met her. She came up last year for Tet. And she and I were just talking about a friend that committed suicide. And she was, that had such an impact on her. But being young and stubborn as a teenager didn't really go far. But I can't believe that really pushed you that far. And then, but we're still good friends, and we text all the time, and we meet up sometimes too. But she's like, that really had an impact on her and her life choices afterwards on that. Yeah. And so those the series of one after another, and then boom, I got to do it now. And then I take your word for it, I'm going to go. I didn't even know to call him Thay, I don't know who he was. So I was like, okay, so I got to do this now. If I wanted to ordain, if I wanted to show my friends that there's another way, all these teachings that I've received and the whole process of awakening, if you want to call it that. Yeah. How come my friends don't get this? And I wanted to share it with my friends. And it was not about finding peace for myself or healing myself or transforming myself. It was hey, we got to spread this out, get this information out. There's so many different ways of dealing with our suffering, or if you want to call it our problems, and then instead of what the generic society has given you, this cheap stuff.
And you going against the grain of all that, going against the grain of what your friends were doing and what society is doing, to me, you've always kind of been a representation of independence in the Sangha. And I'm wondering, how do you square that in a community where you have the same haircut and you all wear the same thing and you have to walk in the same way and largely act the same way as everyone else?
How do you
square
how I can be me in this commune? Well, I want to say I've said this many times to some of my younger sisters. Thay's teachings and Thay's practice, he never once said, even for teachings for monastics or for lay friends, that I want you to do things like me. He never said that. I mean, unless I missed that Dharma talk or I chose to miss it. But I've never in my, 20-something years, heard Thay specifically say, you should walk like me. You should breathe like me. You should eat like me. You should act like me. Thay was very open about creativity, expressing yourself mindfully. And I remember, I think maybe I was too young, and he spoke about it. I don't know in English or in Vietnamese, but it's the early days when I was still a novice or an aspirant, and they had just discovered this cloning. I think it was a sheep or something like that. And he said he didn't like that cloning because even if they took a cell, Thay's cell, and cloned another Thay, it wouldn't be the same Thay. The environment would be different. The education would be different. The setting, that cloned Thay wouldn't have to go through the Vietnam War, the French War, etc., etc., etc. So it would not exactly be the same. Mm-hmm. And so I took that at that time. It's like Thay doesn't want to clone. You know, I'm doing things, I can keep my individuality or my uniqueness, as Sister Kinh Nghiem, because I feel that what I'm doing is not hurting anyone. It doesn't break the precepts. But I can express myself and communicate what I'm feeling through how I was told one time, Sister Kinh Nghiem, can you help me? I was like, help you with what? Like, can you give me some fashion advice? And I was looking at this lay friend, I was like, are you serious? I wear the same robe every single day, And she's like, no, but every single time I come up to Deer Park, you make the robe look different. I'm like, how? How can I make the robe look different? It's like, no, there's a fashion sense, a style, your accessory, your scarf or your glasses makes it look different. And that, it's like a classical style. It's very classic. It never goes old. And so she asked me for fashion advice. But other than that, I feel we have this idea that we have to be like somebody else. And for me, sometimes it's also because you want to have a sense of security, like a sense of belonging. And if you do anything different, then you don't belong. The fear of being left out, the fear of not being accepted. And everybody lives in that kind of fear. That's why everybody becomes so rigid. You can filter this out if you want to. Everybody becomes so rigid because they are afraid. They are afraid. And for me, it's like, if you trust in yourself, if you trust in the community's capacity to embrace, then you can be expressive. Because we're not meant to do the same thing. Even in our breathing, it's different. Some has asthma, some doesn't, But even our breath is not the same. And we can't force it to be the same. And no one has asked us to do the same. As long as you're breathing in such a way that you can still water the seeds of peace and joy in yourself. Right? Whether your breath is long or short, whether you're deep or slow, as long as you can continue to water the seeds of awareness. Because then you become so caught on the formality of things and the image of things that you miss the boat on the whole purpose of it. And you try so hard to copy everyone else that you lose your peace and joy. You lose that because then you're caught up in this idea of how it's supposed to be done rather than just do it.
Finally, though, what advice do you have to listeners who may be interested in the monastic path?
Get rid of all of your ideas of what monastic path is. You come here. I mean, the practice is wonderful, and it's for you to come and see for yourself. But if you start getting ideas of what you expect monastic life to be like, you will have a hard time. Because then there's two sides to the coin, if you want to say it, Sometimes the sisters have some expectation, and then you and yourself have some expectations. Oh, I thought this was a Buddhist community. We're supposed to practice loving kindness and compassion, and how come everybody's so mean? And honestly, if you let go of their ideas and just focus on your bodhichitta, focus on what you want, and those other things of how people say things to you and how will just sort of like be minor. It's not important. I mean, though, yes, it hurts and it helps to communicate, and you can learn how to communicate those feelings, the emotions that arise. But if you come with a mindset idea of what you expect the monastic life to be, you will be disappointed. And you can edit this out. But, for me, ordaining at such a young age and being still around for 20 plus years, you receive a lot of fruits. You receive a lot of benefits for that, for yourself and for your family and for anyone who comes. But I honestly think that come with a clean slate, in a sense of let go of your ideas and allow the flow of things just to push you forward. Because as long as you have your ideas, you become that resistance to it. You hold back. You have these ridges because of your ideas. And I've told many sisters many times, aspirants to be, is to run away now. Go away, run away now, and don't come back. But if you do decide to go through this, it's your own responsibility. In that sense, it's like don't tell you. I didn't warn you. I warned you.
It's like a version of what your mom did for you.
Yes. I mean, it's like get away while you can. It's not too late.
But more, it's like this is your choice. Okay, so this is not on me.
Yeah. And it's. I mean, because honestly, we're gonna say if we're gonna be offering, people come and people leave. They made a choice to come and they made a choice to leave. And they can, like in any situation, if you're angry at someone, you always want to blow your anger or blame somebody else for it, But ultimately, you made that choice. And in order to support that choice, I would say get rid of all your ideas. It'll make yourself so much easier in order to just be opened, because as long as you have these ideas and you have these boxes and you have these categories, nothing's going to fit in perfectly. And you can't fill in as much of the corners of those boxes as you want. So get rid of your ideas and just come open-minded and just focus on what you really want to do and what you want to achieve. One of the advice that I give to monastics sometimes, or even I tell myself, because I have to honestly say it has not been an easy ride the past 23 years. I think it's 24 years, yeah. It has not been an easy ride. It's not about the work. It's not about anything else. Like work is small things and stress. Surprise, we have stress. But the one advice that I always give my monastic sisters and to myself is I did not ordain because of the individual who's giving me the problem. So I will not leave the monastic community because of that individual who is giving me the problem. They should not be the reason for the choice of my life, because it's your life, your choice. You can do what you want to do, even in this community. They should not have the power over that. And you have every right, every authority in the direction of your practice, if you're willing to be opened enough for it. Yeah. So it's not because of him, it's not because of her that you ordained. And so it's not gonna be because of him or because of her that you leave. It has to be solely you and what you want. And you have every choice to how you want to water those seeds inside of you. Given as long as it doesn't violate the precepts and the fine manners. There's a minimum of what we need to do for the harmony of everyone else. But you have that space to be individually expressive. Yeah.
Thanks so much for listening. Each week we'll release another interview, so please subscribe. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please help us spread the word. Today's episode is produced and edited by Kenley Neufeld. Music is generously offered to us by Benjamin Portson and Alex Klein. Our special thanks to Sister Kinh Nghiem for sitting with me and sharing her story. Meet the Monastics is recorded at Deer Park Monastery, a mindfulness practice center in the Plum Village tradition of Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh in Escondido, California, on the traditional and unceded lands of the Kumeyaay Nation, to whom we extend our gratitude and respect. Deer Park offers mindfulness retreats and public days of mindfulness throughout the year, and a 5-year monastic training program for 18 to 35-year-olds. If you're interested in visiting, check out our website, deerparkmonastery.org, or follow us on social media. I'm Brother Min An. See you next week.